He was handsome. He was intelligent. He was charming. And behind that smile lived one of the most manipulative and terrifying serial killers in modern history. The name Ted Bundy has become a symbol of evil hiding in plain sight. A man who blended into society so effortlessly that no one imagined the horror he was capable of. This is the story of Theodore Robert Bundy. His life, poor his crime, banned his gruesome end. Chapter 2. Early Years, a Life Built on Lies. Theodore Robert Cowell was born on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont. From the moment he entered the world, his life was wrapped in deception. His mother, Eleanor Louise Cowell, was unmarried. To avoid scandal, the family claimed Ted was Louise's younger brother. Her parents raised him as their own son. Ted grew up believing his mother was his sister. That early lie carved a permanent crack in his understanding of identity, trust, and belonging. As a child, he was quiet, withdrawn, and detached. Family members would later recall unsettling moments that hinted at something dark beneath the surface. Stories of knives placed beside sleeping relatives. A young Ted watching with a cold, emotionless stare. At 4 years old, Ted and his mother moved to Tacoma, Washington. There, she married a man named Johnny Bundy, a hospital cook. Ted took his surname, becoming Theodore Robert Bundy, a name that would eventually strike fear around the world. But Ted never accepted his stepfather. He quietly resented him. He saw him as socially inferior, financially weak, and far beneath the lifestyle Ted fantasized about throughout school. Ted was academically gifted, but socially isolated. He struggled to connect, especially with girls. While other boys were forming friendships and relationships, Ted observed from the sidelines, studying people, learning what impressed them, what persuaded them, and what earned trust. Chapter 3. Becoming the Charmer. By the time Bundy entered the University of Washington in the mid-1960s, he had learned an important lesson. To be accepted, he had to perform. He crafted a version of himself he believed would be admired, polite, intelligent, well-spoken, and ambitious. It was during this time that Bundy entered a relationship with a woman often identified by the alias Stephanie Brooks. She was everything Ted wanted. Beautiful, from a wealthy family, sophisticated and confident. To Ted, she represented the life he believed he deserved. Status, admiration, and success. When she ended the relationship, telling him he lacked maturity and direction, it shattered him. That heartbreak became a turning point. It planted a seed of bitterness, humiliation, and resentment that would follow him for the rest of his life. From that moment forward, Ted Bundy became obsessed with presentation. He worked to construct a new identity, one of charm, intellect, and future success. He studied psychology, learning how people think and behave. He volunteered at a crisis hotline, where co-workers described him as empathetic and patient. He entered politics. He gained the trust of highly respected figures. He learned to mimic emotion, to charm strangers, and to wear a convincing mask. Behind that mask, something far darker was growing. Chapter 4. the first attacks. By the early 1970s, Bundy began acting on the violent fantasies he had nurtured for years. In January 1974, a young woman named Karen Sparks was attacked in her sleep in Seattle. She survived, but with permanent injuries. Weeks later, another student, Linda Healy, vanished from her home. Her bed was found neatly made, but her pillowcase was bloodstained. She was never seen alive again. Over the next 6 months, young women began disappearing around Washington state. The pattern was chilling. All were attractive. All had long brown hair parted in the middle. All vanished without a trace. Witnesses described a charming man named Ted who approached women in public places, pretending to need help, sometimes with his arm in a sling, sometimes struggling with books or equipment. Once a woman stepped close enough, she was gone. Bundy had perfected his method of hunting. He drove a tan Volkswagen Beetle, ordinary, forgettable, the perfect trap. By the summer of 1974, fear gripped the Pacific Northwest. 7 women had disappeared. The public finally heard the phrase serial killer, and Ted Bundy's pattern had begun. Chapter 5: The Spread of Terror. As pressure grew in Washington, Bundy moved to Utah to study law. Soon after his arrival, women began disappearing there as well. In October 1974, 17-year-old Nancy Wilcox went missing in Salt Lake City. 2 weeks later, Carol DeRoche was attacked but managed to escape Bundy's car. She would later become a key witness. Disappearances spread quickly. Utah, Colorado, Oregon, Idaho, each state searching for a different man, unaware they were all hunting the same predator. Bundy adapted constantly. He altered his appearance, changed tactics, crossed state borders, and stayed ahead of police. But eventually he slipped. In August 1975, a highway patrol officer pulled Bundy over. Inside his car were handcuffs, rope, masks, and tools for restraint. It was enough to arrest him on suspicion of kidnapping. The mask was beginning to crack. Chapter 6: The Escapes. Bundy was convicted in Utah for the kidnapping of Carol DeRoche. Meanwhile, investigators in multiple states began comparing information, slowly realizing that one man may be responsible for dozens of disappearances. Bundy saw the walls closing in, and he refused to be trapped. His first escape came in June 1977, when he jumped from a courthouse window during a hearing in Colorado. But he was recaptured 6 days later. Months later, Bundy escaped again, climbing through a hole he carved in the ceiling of his jail cell. By the time guards realized, he was long gone. He traveled across the country and reached Florida under the name Chris Hagen. Hungry, desperate, and losing control, he began the most violent phase of his crimes. Chapter 7: The Florida Murders. In the early hours of January 15th, 1978, Bundy entered the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. In minutes, 4 women were attacked. 2 survived with terrible injuries. 2 others, Lisa Lisi and Margaret Bowman, were murdered. Hours later, he attacked again elsewhere. Days after that, he abducted 12-year-old Kimberly Leach from her school. Her remains were found weeks later. Bundy's violence had become frantic and chaotic, far beyond his earlier patterns. But that recklessness would soon expose him. Chapter 8: Capture and Trial. On February 15th, 1978, a police officer in Pensacola pulled Bundy over. When the officer checked the stolen license plate and confirmed Bundy's identity, the nationwide search ended. In 1979, Bundy stood trial for the Chi Omega murders. It was the first televised trial in American history. Bundy acted as his own attorney, smiling for cameras and trying to manipulate the courtroom. He even proposed to his girlfriend, Carol Ann Boone, during the trial. She accepted, but his charm had no power left. Bundy was found guilty and sentenced to death, and in 1980 he received a second death sentence for the murder of Kimberly Leach. The world finally saw him for what he was. Chapter 9: Confessions and Final Days. Bundy spent almost 10 years on death row, filing appeals and seeking attention through interviews. As the end approached, he began confessing to murders across several states. At least 30 victims were confirmed, though the true number was likely far higher. He admitted to returning to some victims and committing acts too disturbing to describe. Even near death, he tried to shift blame instead of accepting responsibility. Chapter 10: The Execution. On January 24th, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. His final words were, "Jim and Fred, I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." Outside, crowds gathered, cheering and celebrating the end of one of America's most infamous killers. Bundy wanted to be remembered for charm and intellect. Instead, he was remembered for brutality. Chapter 11: The Legacy of Bundy. Ted Bundy remains a warning that evil can look ordinary. He didn't appear monstrous. He looked like anyone else. His life shows that the most dangerous predators often hide behind the most convincing smile.